kids! Okay. Today we're going to be reading from your cousin Rick's book, Dead Men Hike No Trails.
Yay!
This is a story I wrote from when I hiked the Appalachian Trail. I hiked for a long, long time in the woods, and this is one little story that I thought you guys would like.
Cool.
Like a lot. So here we go. Alright. It occurred the evening of the day that Crispy saw his bear. If it weren't for my getting in a huff about that, for I had yet to see any bears here in Appalachia, and the general crowded state of the trail, I might not have walked so far and pushed so hard this day. But I did. Leaving the thru-hiker cluster far behind me, I dashed out of the safety of the forest alone. I ran far out across open fields beneath blackening thunderhead skies, onward and onward, exhausted but driven, by God, to reach and sleep beneath a rumored gigantic 300-year-old oak tree. As like a digital photo with the contrast cranked all the way up, the atmosphere all around me lit up with fierce golden sunlight, beaming horizontally across the earth beneath a boiling black mantle of storm sky. It's a big word, huh? You guys know what a mantle is?
Like the mantle on a fireplace.
That's right. It's basically a big, dark, stormy sky. It was hanging right over. As I navigated the prairie, the tall grass around me sprang to life with stags leaping, their hoof impacts drumming in frantic retreat, startled no doubt by my own late and frantic dash for the cover of the next copse of trees. A small gathering of buildings sat nestled in the distance. A white church, a red barn, a handful of old graying skeletal houses, once homes where families gathered around the hearth, worked this field perhaps. But not a human soul was out today. I must have been quite the sight had anyone been watching. To the hidden observer I might have resembled the Arctic scientist in Farley Mowatt's Never Cry Wolf, running naked across the tundra, a wolf-frightened herd of caribou splaying out ahead of me at top speed. And it just got better. If I weren't a strong believer in basically in all things magic and mysterious under heaven, I may not have been privy even to what I'd seen so far. But in the woods ahead, greater magic lay in wait. Into the woods I ran, the darkest woods imaginable, considering the sun had yet to set. Dark, electric, haunting was the trail. Not a few centuries ago, no sane person ever would have dared enter such a forest. He would have been eaten alive, if only by superstition. But onward I ran. I just knew that giant oak tree had to be somewhere up ahead. Then the shift came, the insects disappeared, and the air directly in front of my face turned a pea soup green. If I'd had a tuning fork, it would have been singing a bone-shrilling song of warning. Final warning, lightning strikes and rain, about to happen any minute. So I stopped. And went right into emergency tent setup mode. I wasn't happy with the setting, because of course I hadn't made it to my intended mark, the Keffer Oak. But it felt as though I didn't have a second to spare, no time to even scan the area for a better spot. I tore off my backpack, eviscerated its contents like a bear clawing out a honeycomb under heavy attack by bees. Found my tent, tied one end to the nearest tree, for I was using a hammock tent at the time, rushed to another tree, a sufficient distance from the first, tied off that end. Not until I had attached and anchored down the rainfly did I breathe my first breath of faint relief, and that is when I saw it. It had been there all along, but I'd been too focused on the task at hand to see it in my peripheral vision. The Keffer Oak tree. Not only had I made it to this tree of legend, so large and far-reaching were its limbs that I had indeed set up my tent right underneath of it, as had been my wish. It struck me so dumb I fell right over on my butt and stared agog at its magnificence. At its base it was huge as a house. Okay, a small house. Thoreau's cabin, perhaps, but huge by tree standards, and reaching out from it in 100 directions, some directly over my head, were its multitude of arms, each branch as thick around as any tree in the forest. So do you see that? Like this big tree was like, all of its arms were reached out all over this forest of smaller trees that I was in. Yeah, and I didn't even know I was under it when I set up my tent. Sprawled out on the ground, it occurred to me that the deluge had not come. Deluge means a lot of rain, big rain, or a big dumping amount of water. Not yet anyway, but it didn't seem likely now. Just like that, the atmosphere had softened, the green cast gone out of the air, thunder grumbled, and lightning still flashed, but nary a strike. It flashed as if to say, "I'm still here, watch out." But we knew better, the tree and I, for by now I had risen and covered the distance to the woolly mammoth and stood touching it, my right hand palm open against it, feeling its life force. I closed my eyes and focused all my mind's attention on catching information coming through my hand, if any. So much history, so much time. This tree had witnessed America's entire history as a nation, and then some. What stories you could tell, I spoke aloud as I crossed to a tall stanchion that served as both a ladder over a cattle fence and in this case a platform by which to more closely admire the Keffer Oak tree. "How little and insignificant I must seem to you," I said to the tree. "In your perception of space and time, my night's visit will seem but a fleeting millisecond flash." Standing atop the stanchion, I embraced the tree with all the reach possible of my puny little arms. I hugged it, and I spoke at length with it of many things. Beyond the fence there stretched a small field of grass. Beyond the grass, more forest. I invited all those who had gone before me to join me there and sit in the arms of this oh-so-stunning giant. I gazed up and pictured them positioned throughout the tree's branches, smiling at me, their legs swinging like children. My friends Chris O'Connor, Glenn Smith, Luciano Lenchantin, my Uncle David and Aunt Nancy, both my grandfathers, and sweet angel Grandma Selina, and many, many more. That's your Uncle David, too, and Aunt Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My pets, too, Lucy, Sketch, Gator, and Matilda. My eyes delivered then what the storm had not, and I slumped to a sitting position and howled like a wolf, as grief blew out of me like steam filling a field and forest alike. Lightning flashed, less frequent, less threatening, but no rain came. I chanced to notice that the mosquitoes had not returned. Not a single insect hung in the air. Standing there, hugging this ancient giant, my right cheek against its soft skin of bark, now wet with my tears, my body stoned on its own adrenaline, my mind open to the whole field of possibilities in this infinite universe of which we are such a little part. And there, in that state of mind, I saw her, my fairy. Clear as a diamond held up for inspection in the bright flicker of a Zippo's flame, there hung in just outside my left eye's vision the most lovely little feminine creature I have ever seen, the only one I have ever seen. She smiled at me, and before I could lift my cheek from the tree to see her better, she was gone. Then and there, while wonder lingered in my mind, and before disappointment at her sudden disappearance could dim the shine of my bedazzled face, night finally came, and with it a million fireflies, to light the Keffer Oak, and me, and the field of grass all beyond. Despite my general disenchantment with the hammock tent and many a night of poor sleep, that night I do believe I slept the sweetest sleep. I believe my soul slept in heaven that night. I really do. And that's it. That's the story of the ferry
That was cool.
in Keffer Oak. You like that?
Yeah.
Thank you guys for being so attentive.
Mom, I want to watch the